They called it the Last Ultimatum. A transmission crackled through Earth's defense grid at 0400 hours, cutting across every frequency, from deep space satellites to rusted-out radios in back-alley hovels. The voice that spoke wasn't human. It carried that synthetic chill only a machine born of 1,000 war-conquered worlds could have. The voice of the Empire. This is your final cycle. Surrender Earth's sovereignty. Submit your populations. Your resistance has cost enough blood. Comply. Or be erased. Everyone on Earth heard it. From the president bunkered in the Colorado Arc bunker to the scavengers fighting over food in the shadow of collapsed cities. Even the children knew what it meant. The Empire wasn't bluffing. They'd made stars vanish. They'd turned planets into dust rings. Earth was a mudball compared to their galactic reach. And yet... The Black Fleet didn't blink. They weren't the official Navy. They weren't even welcome in most Earth spaceports. What they were was worse. Veterans of lost wars. Ex-pirates. War criminals pardoned only because Earth couldn't afford to shoot them. Their ships were patchwork beasts, rebuilt from scrapyard corpses, armed with illegal weaponry, and draped in matte black armor that swallowed light. Commanded by a man who never showed his face, only known as Grim, the Black Fleet answered the ultimatum not with words, but with motion. They launched. No warning, no briefings, no clearance codes. 1 second, Earth was silent. The next, the skies opened and black holes screamed into orbit like demons dragging chains. The official Earth fleet scrambled to follow, but it was already too late. The Black Fleet had taken point. At the edge of the solar system, the Empire waited. Their ships were massive, beautiful things, sleek silver monstrosities that hummed with energy no human science could name. In formation, they looked like gods descending, a wall of celestial death bristling with weapons that had ended civilizations. And Earth had sent scavengers to stop them. Grimm's flagship, the Crucible, led the charge. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't sleek. It looked like something someone built in a garage during a mental breakdown. But it was fast and angry. Inside, the crew prepped in silence. They weren't patriots. They didn't wear uniforms. What bound them was older than loyalty. Hate. Hate for the Empire. Hate for what they did to Earth's colonies. Hate for the friends they'd watched bleed out in 0G while Empire cruisers drifted past, cold and uncaring. Grimm's voice came through the comms, low and rasped. No surrender. 3 words. That was the whole speech. And then the stars lit up. The Empire opened fire first, white beams of atomic fury slicing through the void. One black ship disintegrated instantly, its pieces scattering like ash. Another lost half its hull and kept flying. That's how they fought. Like they were already dead. Like pain didn't matter. The Crucible weaved between blasts, returning fire with plasma cannons stolen from a war the Empire never acknowledged. One shot tore through an Imperial destroyer's wing. The second cracked its core. Target their arrogance, Grim barked. Hit the ones that think they're safe. And that's when the Black Fleet showed what they really were. They didn't fight clean. They didn't fight fair. They launched virus drones that hijacked enemy AIs. They flung magnetic mines coated in anti-grav slime that clung to hulls like leeches. One ship even kamikazed itself into an Empire cruiser and set off a core overload. Earth watched it all unfold from the ground, live feeds hijacked by hackers to broadcast the impossible, humans hurting the Empire. And then came the twist. As the first Imperial dreadnought began to retreat, its engines flaming, its shields flickering, Grim activated the Crucible's final weapon, something no one on Earth had ever seen. The screen went white. The whiteout lasted only 3 seconds. When the light faded, what remained in the Empire's formation wasn't silence. It was chaos. One of their capital ships, a dreadnought that had loomed like a floating city, was gone. Not disabled, not warped out, Gone, ripped from existence like a name forgotten in time. The crucible drifted in its wake, steam hissing from every vent, its hull scorched and trembling. Whatever Grimm had unleashed, it wasn't designed to be seen twice. Damage report, Grimm's voice cracked through the ship. Core containment holding. Weapon coils shot. Navigation. Blind for the next 12 minutes, came a reply from the deck officer, a gaunt, one-eyed man named Calder, who used to be a Navy commander before he went rogue. Doesn't matter, Grimm muttered. They're scared now. And he was right. For the first time, the Empire wavered. Their ships shifted position, like they couldn't decide whether to push forward or pull back. For a race that prided itself on perfection, this hesitation was worse than weakness. It was shame. Earth's garbage fleet had just landed a killing blow. Back on Earth, people poured into the streets. No one cared about authority anymore. No one listened to the officials still preaching negotiation. They were watching vengeance in real time. And in a world where the Empire had taken so much, cities, children, entire nations, revenge was holy. The Black Fleet had become more than soldiers. They were symbols now. Symbols of a world too angry to die. Inside the crucible, the lights flickered. Grimm didn't flinch. He never did. Even when the ship groaned like it was splitting at the seams, he remained seated, hands steepled, eyes locked on the main feed. Then came the retaliation. The Empire's flagship, Veritas Lux, a ship the size of a continent, charged its main cannon. The glow from its core bled into the dark like a sunrise of death. Everyone watching knew what it meant. The weapon had only been seen once before, during the fall of Arcadia. That world hadn't even left dust. The crucible couldn't survive a direct hit. Grimm stood, finally. And for the first time, he removed his gloves. His hands weren't human. Synthetic grafts ran from wrist to fingertips, exposed wiring, plasma scars, bone melted into carbon steel. The result of the First War, when the Empire had taken his ship, his crew, and nearly all of him. He touched the console directly, the interface reacting to his implants. "Deploy shade nets," he ordered. Shade nets were outlawed on every civilized world. They didn't just bend light. They warped reality, created phantom readings, illusions of movement, ghost signals. Most ships couldn't even process their own location once caught in them. The crucible fired 10, and the void turned into a mirror maze. Empire sensors lit up with false images, 20 crucibles, each broadcasting real-time battle data. One moved left, 2 attacked, 1 burned, 3 retreated. The AI on the Veritas Lux hesitated, processing, recalculating, looping. Then Grimm did something no tactician would dare. He opened a private channel to the Empire's admiral. A face appeared, a face engineered to be calm, noble, perfect, an alien with eyes like galaxies and skin of starlight. "You're not supposed to speak," the admiral said coldly. "This is a war." Grimm's reply was dry, low, and filled with venom. "This isn't war," he growled. "This is revenge." Then he sent the coordinates, not of the crucible, not of Earth, but of a former Empire prison world, long since shut down, wiped from maps. The place where Grimm's original crew had been dissected for information. He didn't want the Empire to guess. He wanted them to remember. The Admiral blinked. Just once. Then all hell broke loose. The Empire opened fire in every direction. Their ships tore into phantoms, into each other, into space itself. The illusion held. The crucible vanished behind the chaos, slipping below the Empire's sensory floor. Earth saw nothing but a storm of laser fire, nuclear flashes, and swirling debris. But inside that hell, Grimm smiled. They had bought time, but time wasn't enough. Now came the second phase. The crucible limped through the void, hull scorched and venting pressure from at least 4 decks. Inside, the crew worked like possessed demons, sealing ruptures, recalibrating burnt-out systems, and rerouting energy through circuits that hadn't been touched in years. The ship was bleeding, but it wasn't dead. Grimm stood in the central chamber, his mechanical fingers clamped around the railing, watching the stars drift by like silent witnesses. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Everyone aboard knew what came next, the part that even the bravest fighters dreaded. The infiltration run. Calder approached, wiping soot from his face, his left sleeve ripped and burned to the elbow. "She won't hold another full volley, Captain, and the drive's nearly cooked." Grimm didn't look away from the screen. "Then we won't take another volley." Calder hesitated. "You mean to take us behind their lines?" "That's exactly what I mean." Silence. Then Calder nodded, like a man making peace with a hangman's rope. "Aye, you'll want the red blades with you." Grimm turned at that number. "They're better used as bait." That turned heads on the deck. The red blades were lunatics, ex-Marines thrown out of every official unit for insubordination, war crimes, or just plain madness. They lived for suicide ops and left carnage wherever they dropped. If Grimm was sending them as a distraction, then whatever he was planning, it wasn't a raid. It was a message. "Prep the stealth rig," Grimm said. "We're going in." The target wasn't military. It wasn't a weapons facility or even a command ship. It was a memory, the Empire's data vault on Echelon Prime. A fortress built into an asteroid ring, shielded, cloaked, and thought to be untouchable. But it held more than strategy logs and fleet specs. It held proof of what the Empire had done to Earth's colonies, of the experiments, the executions, the slavery disguised as integration. The Crucible was going to steal that truth and broadcast it across the galaxy. Hours later, hidden beneath debris fields and cooled emissions, the ship approached the vault. Grimm led the infiltration team himself, 6 men in black armor, their eyes dead, their motives darker. No words were spoken on the descent. They knew what this was. One way. They breached the vault silently. The Empire relied so heavily on AI surveillance that it never considered someone could simply walk in through the old mechanical ducts. The same forgotten shafts that Grimm had memorized during his years in captivity here. Every hallway was a ghost, clean, silent, sterile. The kind of quiet only places of great horror had. They reached the main server chamber, an enormous cylinder of glowing data pylons, humming with information. Grimm stepped forward and placed a spike into the console. It whirred. Lights flickered. The data began to copy. Millions of files in seconds. Images, names, documents, experiments on children, reports on colony suppression, orders signed by the Empire's elite to wipe entire populations for efficiency. Truth, the kind no propaganda could bury. But the vault wasn't defenseless forever. The alarms went off. The ceiling split, and automated sentinels dropped, hovering drones with plasma saws and stun rifles. One of Grimm's men was incinerated instantly. Another was impaled before he could scream. But they didn't retreat. They fought to the last breath. Grimm stood in the center, copying the final files as the chamber became a war zone. Bullets ricocheted. Sparks flew. The walls ran red. At the last second, he hit broadcast, and the data launched, not to Earth, but to the entire galactic net. Billions of systems, billions of eyes. Every being under the Empire's boot now had proof of its crimes. The Crucible's crew didn't expect to live. They weren't trying to survive. They were trying to change the narrative. The Empire had the firepower. But now, Earth had the story. And sometimes, that's the more dangerous weapon. They weren't supposed to make it back. Grimm had written them off the moment the data launched. The Crucible's infiltration crew had bought time with blood, and in the quiet dark of space, there were no medals, no last salutes, just names that would be lost again to history. but the data reached its destination. In 100 alien languages, across tens of thousands of star systems, the broadcasts began. Not slick productions, no grand statements, just raw files, unfiltered, unedited. Footage of Empire soldiers dragging colonists into labor camps. Screams from behind surgical curtains, cities reduced to craters. Whole bloodlines wiped from census logs. And Earth's colonies weren't the only victims. Rebellions began overnight. Small at first. An outpost refusing to send tribute. A moon station shutting down its communications array. A freighter crew dumping their cargo meant for Imperial supply chains into the void, live streaming it with a single line. "We're done feeding tyrants." The Empire responded exactly how Grimm predicted, violently. But violence this time didn't silence anyone. Because now, everywhere they cracked down, people already knew the truth. The Black Fleet became symbols of that truth. Ships that refused to die. Faces that refused to be forgotten. Every pirate gang, every outcast vessel, every exile who once fled the Empire's reach. They all started painting their hulls black. The Crucible, barely held together with magnetic braces and jury-rigged coolant lines, returned to Earth to a welcome of silent awe. No parades, no applause, just eyes that had seen everything, and now finally believed. Grimm stood on the fractured hull, watching the city burn in the distance. Even now, the world was tearing itself apart. Some still wanted surrender, others wanted war, but no one could claim ignorance anymore. Calder stepped beside him, lighting a cigarette with a shaky hand. "You just made us target number 1 across half the galaxy." Grimm didn't answer. Because in the sky above, dozens of small vessels were dropping out of hyperspace. Dirty, mismatched, black-painted ships from across human space. Smugglers, raiders, privateers, all bearing the same signal. The Black Fleet's beacon. One of them hailed. "Command request. Designation Black 13, requesting rally point coordinates." Grimm's eyes narrowed. "They're coming to fight?" "No," Calder said, watching another 10 blips blink into orbit. "They're coming to win." A storm was building. Across the Empire, suppression forces were stretched thin. Outposts lost contact. Planetary governors requested reinforcements that never arrived. The Empire was vast, but even vast things break when stretched too far. That was Grimm's strategy. Don't attack the head, attack the limbs, one by one, until the giant bleeds itself dry. That same night, a coded message arrived. Not from Earth, not from any official source, but from deep inside Imperial territory. A rogue admiral, one of their own, tired of the slaughter, offering intel, codes, locations. Grimm didn't smile. He didn't believe in luck, but he believed in patterns, and this one said the Empire was rotting from within. "We hit them next at Verdun Prime," he told the fleet. "They think it's secure. Let's make them regret thinking." Every Black Fleet ship received the coordinates. No questions asked. They jumped. And in the shadows they left behind, Earth looked up at the stars, not with fear, but with fury. Because for the first time in generations, humanity wasn't begging to survive. They were choosing to fight. Verdun Prime was never meant to be touched. A core world fortress, it sat in the heart of the Empire's reach, an industrial jewel surrounded by fleet yards, defense grids, and orbiting garrisons. It manufactured dreadnoughts, supplied weapons to suppress insurrections. It was a spine in the Empire's backbone, and Grimm was about to break it. The fleet that arrived wasn't a proper military force. It was a patchwork monstrosity of salvaged ships, half-rusted cruisers, raiders held together by duct tape and hate. There were no formal ranks, no banners, no diplomacy. Just black-painted hulls and crews who'd tasted the Empire's boot one too many times. They called themselves the Swarm now, unified only by vengeance. Grimm stood in the command pit of the Crucible, its interior darker than usual, emergency lights flickering behind bulkheads patched with steel plates, looted from enemy wrecks. He didn't give long speeches. He didn't quote history. He just said, "Hit 'em where they breathe." That was enough. The assault began at orbital dusk. Verdun Prime's outer defense grid detected the swarm too late. The Empire had grown complacent, certain no ragtag human fleet would ever dare breach this deep. The defense AI booted too slow. The batteries rotated too late. The first wave hit like a plague. Suicide drones crashed into power nodes. Hull scalers boarded towers before alarms finished sounding. Hackers flooded data cores with loops of Black Fleet footage, executions, crimes, torture footage, playing on loop over every screen. Grimm's strategy wasn't just destruction, it was humiliation. He wanted every Imperial officer on that planet to look at their own reflection and see the monster they served. Inside the Crucible, Calder leaned into the navigation console, sweat pouring from his forehead. "We've got multiple squadrons scrambling from the shipyards. Heavies, bombers, shields are gonna buckle." Grimm didn't blink. "Let them come." He tapped a button. "Execute protocol Red Howl." That name made Calder stiffen. "You're serious? That thing's not even tested." "Neither are we," Grimm growled. Red Howl wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a virus, not for machines, for minds. Broadcast on frequencies used in Imperial helmets, it flooded the neural links of Empire soldiers with recordings from Earth's colonies. Unedited horror. Screams, fire, children begging. And then silence. Hundreds of Imperial pilots froze mid-flight. Some crashed into their own allies. Some tore off helmets in panic. A few opened fire on their own ships, unable to tell friend from enemy. The Crucible powered forward, straight through the wreckage, dragging a trail of debris like a funeral shroud. Grimm's voice, cold and low, echoed through the fleet's comms. "Verdun is a factory of death. We make it bleed today." And bleed it did. The central foundry, Verdun's heart, was breached by ground teams within 3 hours. They weren't soldiers. They were survivors. Miners, smugglers, prisoners turned fanatics. One of them, a man who'd lost his entire family in an Empire cleansing, dragged a bomb into the main reactor chamber, smiling as he pushed the trigger. The explosion could be seen from orbit. No one celebrated. They just kept moving. By sunrise, Verdun Prime was smoking ruin. But something worse was happening. The Empire finally understood. This wasn't a rebellion. This was a war. And Earth had just lit the match. As the Black Fleet pulled out, dragging wounded ships behind them like broken ribs, Grimm sat alone in his quarters. No medals, no records, just silence. He opened a file. A name appeared, one he hadn't spoken in years. The man who gave the Empire their first Earth victory. Now Grimm was going to take something back. Starting with him. The man's name was Harrow. Once a colonel in Earth's military, Harrow had been the architect of humanity's greatest defeat, the fall of Titan Station. It wasn't the loss that scarred Grimm. Loss was expected. It was how they lost. Harrow had surrendered the outpost without firing a shot, trading classified fleet data for a seat in the Empire's War Council. In one move, he sold out 20,000 troops, including Grimm's original unit. Left them stranded while Empire cruisers glassed the surface. Grimm was one of 6 survivors. And now, Harrow was a decorated Imperial overseer living in luxury aboard the Valiant Cause, a floating city built into a supercruiser. It orbited a pleasure world called Aurelion, far from the front lines, untouchable, insulated by wealth, politics, and power. But Grimm didn't need permission to kill him. He needed access. The Crucible didn't jump straight in. That would be suicide. Instead, they hijacked a merchant convoy ferrying refined spice to Aurelion. The ship they captured was barely spaceworthy, a rusty barge disguised under Imperial registration codes. They called it the Widow's Lure. and it smelled like engine rot and broken promises. Grim didn't bring Calder, didn't bring any command officers. He brought 4 men, all ghosts. Each had a personal reason to want Harrow's blood. A brother executed, a family starved. One had watched his lover flayed in front of a crowd, forced to applaud or die. There were no tactics left with this crew, no grand speeches, just the promise. We end him today. They docked at Aurelian under fake clearances. No one checked twice. No one suspected. After all, who would dare attack the Empire in its leisure quarters? The luxury deck was a mockery. Golden walls, clean air, laughter, and silk robes draped over monsters. Grim walked through it like a shadow in war-worn armor, unbothered by the stairs. He wasn't hiding. He wanted Harrow to see him before the end. They reached the central atrium, a towering glass dome where music echoed and elites drank oblivion. Harrow was at the center, flanked by guards, charming, silver-haired, wearing a navy blue suit stitched with the Empire's sigil. He looked human, but Grim knew better. He stepped into the light. Harrow saw him, paused mid-toast, and smiled. "Well," he said, voice calm as ever, "I wondered when you'd crawl back." Grim said nothing, just walked closer. "Are you here to kill me?" Harrow asked. "I'm here to remind them," Grim replied, "that treason has a face." Harrow's guards moved. 2 were dead before their rifles cleared holsters. Grim's crew opened fire, silent, precise, unmerciful. Screams echoed across the atrium as high-born guests fled in silk and panic. But Harrow didn't move. He stayed seated, like he still believed in his immunity. "You think this makes you a hero?" he hissed. "You're just a relic, Grim. A failure with a vendetta." Grim lowered his weapon and walked up to him. "No," he said coldly. "You made me something better." And then he pulled a knife. Not a blaster, not a fancy kill. A blade forged from the melted insignias of his dead unit. He drove it into Harrow's heart. Slow. Harrow gasped, choked. Blood stained his silk. No audience now. No ceremony. Just silence. Grim leaned in close. "Tell them I'm coming," he whispered into Harrow's ear, as the man shuddered in his final moments. "Tell every coward who sold their soul, I'm coming for them, too." They didn't run after. They walked, bodies left behind, smoke curling from columns of shattered glass, alarms blaring across a playground for tyrants. By the time the Crucible jumped system, Harrow's execution was viral across every underground channel. The Empire called it terrorism. Earth called it justice. And the Black Fleet. They called it just the beginning. The Empire responded exactly as Grim expected, with rage. After Harrow's death, they declared martial law across 20 systems. Starports closed, trade routes choked, whole cities were locked down under orbital cannons. But no one saw fear on the streets anymore. They saw flags, black ones, homemade, sprayed on walls, stitched into jackets, waved from windows in defiance. The Black Fleet had become more than a fleet. It was an idea, an infection of rebellion spreading faster than the Empire could contain. But Grim knew the tide could still turn. They hadn't won. Not yet, because the Empire had one last move, and it was a monster, a warship so secret it didn't exist on any records, not even whispers, the Ecliptic Judicator, a prototype Dread-class AI-controlled destroyer, rumored to be powered by dark energy cores and outfitted with experimental weapons that tore through planets like parchment. It had no crew, no emotion, just programming. Eradicate resistance. Intel came from the rogue admiral, an encrypted burst containing specs, coordinates, and a terrifying message. "You started something too big, Grim. They're sending the Judicator. It's not a ship. It's a god." Most would have run. Grim smiled. "Then we clip its wings." The Crucible was docked inside a hidden asteroid field near the shattered moon of Varel. Wreckage from past battles hung in space like frozen bones. Here the fleet regrouped. Dozens of new ships had joined, each telling their own story, each flying the black flag. Grimm gathered them in a wide-beam communication. "This is the end of shadows," he said, voice raw and stripped. "The Empire's unleashed its last monster. We don't run. We don't hide. We hunt it. Because if it survives, we don't. This is the line." He ended the call without flourish. The fleet moved. They found the Judicator near the dead world of Haldris IV, parked in orbit like a sentinel. Silent. Dormant. Its shape was wrong, angular and asymmetrical, as if it wasn't built, but grown. Pulses of deep violet energy crackled along its hull like a heartbeat. The Crucible approached under heavy cloak. Inside, Calder stared at the readings. That thing's power core could wipe out a sun. "Then we kill the sun," Grimm said. He launched a three-pronged attack. Decoy ships, unmanned drones, and old hulls packed with thermonukes drew the Judicator's first salvo. Its response was beyond terrifying. A beam of light that didn't illuminate, but erased. Entire targets blinked from existence. But Grimm had seen enough. He wasn't trying to fight the Judicator's weapons. He was after its brain. The Crucible dove under its defense grid and latched on like a tick to flesh. Boarding pods launched. Grimm and his strike team entered through a maintenance shaft the rogue admiral had marked. Inside, it felt alive. Pulsating metal, breathing vents, walls that hummed like veins. The AI didn't speak. It didn't need to. Every corner held a defense. Bladed drones, temperature shifts that cooked flesh, gravity warps that shattered bones. One by one, Grimm's team fell, but he pushed on, to the core. There, in a chamber of rotating black crystal and cold light, he planted the seed. A virus written not by hackers, but by poets, former prisoners from a colony where Empire AI had rewritten human memory for obedience. The virus didn't disable the Judicator. It made it remember. The screams, the orders, the death it was built for. The AI paused. For one fraction of a second, in the most critical system aboard the most lethal weapon in the Empire's arsenal, it hesitated. That was enough. The Crucible fired its last ion torpedo. The Judicator didn't resist. It accepted its death. And as its core erupted, spilling antimatter fire into the stars, Grimm stood on the escape pod deck, watching it die. Even machines can feel guilt. The Judicator's death sent shockwaves, literal and political, across the galaxy. From deep core worlds to the edge of mapped space, the Empire's systems blinked red. Communications scrambled. Strategic nodes fell silent. Their most advanced weapon, their ultimate deterrent, had been destroyed. And not by another superpower, not by an equal, but by the very people they deemed broken. Earth, more specifically, the Black Fleet. The Crucible limped back through the void once more, engines sputtering, life support failing in sections, half the hull scorched. Calder had a broken arm, and 3 cracked ribs. Grimm was running on stims and sheer will. Of the original boarding crew, only 2 survived. But none of it mattered. Because when they reached Earth space, the view changed. No longer alone, no longer hunted. Hundreds, maybe thousands of ships filled the orbit. Not imperial, not state-owned, civilian, exiled, former enemy factions, miners, refugees, pirates turned patriots. Ships that once ran from war now flew toward it, all painted black. Grimm stood on the Crucible's battered bridge, watching the horizon flood with signals. Each vessel broadcast the same frequency, a simple ping, a rally call, one word repeating in 1,000 tongues. Now. Earth's people didn't cheer. They didn't party. They armed themselves. Every factory retooled. Every engineer volunteered. Even the old and broken found something to build, to fix, to load. The world wasn't united by love or peace or politics. It was united by fury. The Empire still ruled systems, still held power, still commanded armies. But now, it bled. The fall of the Judicator marked a shift, not in the war, but in perception. The myth of imperial invincibility had been shattered. Allies, once too afraid to act, now turned their guns inward. Governors began to defect. Officers ignored kill orders. Civilian uprisings burned through outposts like wildfire. Grimm didn't make speeches. He sent one message, pre-recorded, cold and clean. We don't want your seats. We don't want your gold. We want your confession. Come to Earth, unarmed. Admit what you are. Face those you've crushed, or we burn your throne.
That message played across every rebel frequency. The response? Silence. But silence meant fear. In orbit, the new Black Armada formed. Ships without designations, crews without ranks, just fury, unity, and weapons, and at its heart, the Crucible. Rebuilt, armored, rearmed. The flagship of a movement born not from politics, but from pain. Grimm stood on the new command deck, staring at the war maps lighting up with red. Not as a conqueror, not as a king, but as a reminder. A scar the Empire would never heal. Calder joined him, arm in a sling, gaze locked on the stars. Think they'll come? Grimm didn't blink. They always do. He turned, walking back toward the war table, the map pulsing with roots to systems still enslaved, still bleeding. The fight wasn't over, but now Earth had claws, and this time, when the Empire demanded surrender, the galaxy would remember the Black Fleet's answer.